And then they're going to eat me! Oh my god!
Continuing our world tour of new custom maps, today we venture to the Glades of the Everqueen, where Isha, mother of the elven race, gazes down upon us all. And if there's one deity who truly loves the mother, it's Papa Plague, who at least in 40k, used her as a tool for testing the virulence of his new diseases. In Warhammer Fantasy, Shalia is the Pox Fulcrum, but could they be aspects of the same goddess, once joined as one, then split once worship grew strong enough in the Empire? And Bretonnia? Well, perhaps, but whatever the truth, an end times rivalry comes to the fore in this one, as we recreate elements of the fall of Altdorf and the end of King Louen Leoncoeur. If you recall, Festus and Louen had a bit of a dust-up in the Temple of Shalia, and it didn't end so well for the King of Bretonnia, weakened by his duel with Kugas. So, the Lord of Flies punished him, and now the King is back for revenge. We're trying a decidedly untryhard build in Domination today, rocking an extremely elite core with Festus, 2 Chosen, 2 Exalted Heroes, and a Great Unclean One. Now, this build is very difficult to remove from an objective. AoE heals, crazy damage output, exactly the type of army meant for a long grind. And that Mortis Drain from Festus is brutal, as are his debuff stack with poison. The issue, of course, is that they can only ever position themselves on a single objective, on a single point. So if you run into a build like this one, the key is to try and spread the field, contest the other 2 objectives wherever they are not, and slowly gain map control while you build up your forces for that final blow. That's the idea anyway, but as always, easier said than done. Nurgle does have more tools on the mobility side than they used to, but I'm not entirely convinced Chaos Knights are the play here, even against what will likely be a mounted army. Bretonnia is going to begin this battle with an infantry swarm and blessed field trebuchets, but will roll out the knights from the reinforcement points as supply comes in. Meanwhile, Louen is poking and prodding with his hippogriff and ensuring at least a few of their number never make it past the halfway point of the map. Nurgle, for their part, just kind of needs to ignore him. Louen is going to have free reign this battle. He's pretty much unkillable with his regen and his stats, and that's okay. As long as he isn't murdering Festus, Lord of Flies is probably fine to humor him a bit. And in fact, I think they want Louen actively to go after the Great Unclean One, because it's one of the few ways that monstrosity can even start to make its money back. So, as Chaos Warriors and Nurgling stream into objective number 2, they're gonna have a difficult time making headway there against all the infantry Bretonnia is about to send that way. And in fact, it might make more sense not to contest objective number 2 at all. The whole point of this build is to stay in that one lane and push forward onto the natural of Bretonnia. Actually, that's objective number 3 in the middle. It's objective number 2 is the natural for Bretonnia, and objective number 1 is natural for Nurgle. And naturally, when Festus and a Great Unclean One make contact, peasants will flee. I'm not sure why. It's not like they aren't already riddled with plague, but instant terror route to be expected when faced with the Chosen of Nurgle. Trebuchets were a very good idea for Bretonnia. They're going to provide some consistent DPS against the armored elites, and more importantly, instantly kill models. I don't believe healing elixirs resurrects, so every Chosen lost is an elite warrior Festus can no longer rely on. Their advance will push them ever closer to Bretonnia's home base, but at objective number 3, Nurgle will find themselves outnumbered and threatened by the Knights of the Lion-Hearted. Nice thing about all these great weapon troops, though, even when they are isolated, they're not halberds, but they still trade pretty well into cav, so even the elite stuff doesn't really want to charge them. And nice attack from behind, nasty stream of corruption streaming in from the flank, Furies coming in from behind, and archers completely overrun and will not be able to focus fire the Great Unclean One, who is being pretty smart and staying in reserve just on the outside of their fire arc. Now the Chosen here, they're going to have a straight up field day. Unfortunately, it's going to be really hard for them to make their value back against swarms of infantry. They really need Grail Knights and Questing Knights to charge into them, start trading well, and that's going to be difficult because Bretonnia doesn't really have any reason to engage them. Particularly when they're being healed up by Festus and supported by 2 of those Exalted Heroes, which are amazing duelists. When you strip them naked, I believe they're 850 gold. Huge weapon strength, huge armor-piercing values, really good duelists, and a great way to support Festus in his conquests of the world. So over on this side, Nurglings and the Chaos Warriors are actually doing a bit better than I expected, but that's mostly because Louen has decided to retreat back towards the middle They've done a good job clearing the back line, and it looks like those Furies are about to crumble out. Though I'd say the Furies already pretty much did what they were supposed to. They shut down the Peasant Bowmen and got some kills on more repeating troops before they disappeared. Great Unclean One's going to have such a difficult time catching anything this battle, but the whole point is to force Bretonnia onto an objective into a grind, and if they're able to do that, it should work out pretty nicely for the single entity. Comet of Cassandora mostly going to be dodged here. It's a really difficult spell to land, just an obscene wind-up time, but not a terrible spell selection on a map like this one, in a game mode like this one, because you know that infantry is going to be forced to commit to points, and if you get a hammer and anvil off and hold them in place, then it can land and absolutely devastate entire infantry formations. Something interesting is taking shape. The Barons of the Bog have been summoned from the Garden. We've shown them before. They're a very good regiment of renown, perhaps even the best amongst the mounted versions added in Game 3. Gonna gobble up these peasants and clear the objective quite quickly. But they've been summoned for one major reason: to link up with the Demon Spew Forsaken. It's a better tactic in land battle than it is in Domination, but the idea is, if you stack all those units together, particularly with Festus and his Pestilent Potions, enemy forces become hilariously bad in melee combat. They can't hit anything, and when they do, it slaps like a wet noodle because of all those weapon strength debuffs. There is a slight problem here for Nurgle, though. Louen Leoncoeur came in with a Sword of Couronne, and Nurgle didn't really retain the blob they typically like to. You want to make sure your Chosen and your Exalted Heroes and your Great Unclean One all stay together, because when they become isolated from each other, that is when Louen can go in and start picking them apart one by one, when they won't have the support from all that healing. Now, they were hit by a Fleshy Abundance, and this is another important element of the Nurgle strat here. Curse of the Slug, that first tier army ability, lowers enemy cast speed by 45%. So, when you stack that up with Poison, it essentially means that even the Companions of Cunel have a really hard time disengaging and will lose a lot more models on the retreat than they otherwise would. So, even though I would argue Fecundity and the healing there is probably a better thing overall, against Bretonnia, I think spamming Curse of the Slug is going to get you more value overall, because it makes it so hard for the Knights to run away, and lets your great weapons rack up a lot more kills. And realistically, it's probably the only way the Great Unclean One's going to hit anything of importance this entire battle. Nice job of the Chosen there to push through the peasant mob, try to tar pit and meat shield them in place in preparation for a Chain Lightning or Comet of Cassandora, but looks like they thought better of it and instead went after the Forsaken, which we'll probably see a lot of in the reinforcing army, just because they get onto the map so quickly and are one of Nurgle's only fast infantry options. Now, of course, one of the highlights of bringing a Great Unclean One, especially in Domination battle, is you get to watch him literally poop on his enemies, and it's a fast way to clear an objective. It smells real bad, and of course it imbues the terror. I mean, what else would explosive diarrhea accomplish? But as Nurgle takes control of Bretonnia's natural and objective number 2, a massive cav swarm is forthcoming. They have the Companions of Cunel on the map. I believe the Knights of the Lionhearted are either on their last legs or dead, but now there are Grail Knights, Knights Errant, and a whole host of elite mounted troops screaming their way towards the contested and straight into the Chosen of Nurgle. No longer have the support from Festus and his Fleshy Abundances or healing elixirs. So Curse of the Slug to ensure the Grail Knights cannot quickly turn around and run away, but I don't think they're going to care with Louen there, and without Immunopsychology or Mark of Slaanesh, those Chosen are pretty much gone on impact, evaporated by the charge of some of Bretonnia's elite mounted warriors. Forsaken and Nurglings realizing the threat to their own natural, coming out of the reinforcement points to help out, and it looks like Festus and his Exalted Heroes may have to retreat and move back towards objective number 1, which will then allow Bretonnia to come out of their own reinforcement points and start contesting their own natural once more. Definitely seeing a mobility advantage from the forces of Bretonnia here, as they cycle charge their way into Nurglings and the Forsaken, but Festus is marching his way back. He is not fast, but if they can bring these Companions of Cunel to blows, they could certainly wreck them quite quickly. And as the sumo stops rain down, looks like the Barons of the Bog Pox Riders are heading their way back towards Bretonnia to ensure that whatever peasants come out of the spawn point will not be able to recap A triple cap for Nurgle here would be very bad. We need to hold on to the single at least so that Bretonnia doesn't get too much of an advantage in terms of VPs. At the moment, it's 650 to 520, so a slight lead in favor of Bretonnia. And it looks like the Pox Riders might just be able to hold on. This is where that weapon damage or weapon strength modifier, the debuff for enemies, is going to be so important. They are a bonus versus infantry cavalry unit, but they dumpster the stats of pretty much anything they fight in melee when you stack up poison and the wasting sickness. So it makes it really hard for enemy cav to take them down as well. They're such a tanky unit, particularly when you support them with heals. Curse of the Slug again. Probably should have left the Furies in there. They were basically just trying to tie down the cavalry and prevent them from moving. Problem is when you disengage with them, they often get the flanking penalty hit them because they turn their flank and rear, get attacked from behind, and their leadership's so bad, they end up just crumbling out. So usually if you commit them somewhere, just keep them in because they're going to die anyway. Fleshy Abundance to keep those Barons of the Bog alive. They're now fighting a lot, but the cap is still in favor of Nurgle, and it's partly due to the fact that the Great Unclean One and the Exalted Hero have rejoined the Barons and are basically preventing these Grail Knights from recapping their own objective. Oh no. Watch out, boys. She's gonna blow. Hot Snakes. The Great Unclean One is spreading some love and virulent disease on objective number 2. Nurgle is not able to recap their own natural, but they got more Chaos Warriors coming out of the woodwork, and it looks like they should be able to mass enough numbers to retake it relatively soon. The question is, how much longer can Bretonnia hold on to it and continue padding that lead? Harbinger of Pestilence Mortar Strain is activated for Festus. Usually, the damage aura is better than the healing aura. You get more out of it, but you combine that with the Pestilent Potions to debuff the Grail Knight stats, and they're really not performing very well in melee at all, particularly not with the Exalted Hero and Great Unclean One nearby. Barons of the Bog got a hammer and anvil off. It would have been disastrous for Louen. If he gets fully surrounded and the Great Unclean One starts beating on him, he won't be alive very long. So Bretonnia was right to disengage there and head back towards objective number 1. Lewin's actually going back in for a duel. He can definitely kill Festus quite quickly. Leechlord does not have good melee stats. He is tanky because of his AoE heal, but when he has the Mortar Strain effect on, if he's fighting a single entity monster like Louen Leoncoeur on Bakey's Hippogriff, it's going to go bad for him. So definitely need to make sure Festus does not die, because if the Leechlord falls here, Nurgle has a 0% chance of winning this battle. Nice charge, frontal one, directly into the Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and Bretonnia's fine to trade some of their cavalry's lives here just to ensure they hold on to the objective, and they're doing a really good job preventing this Nurgle force from leaving their spawn and pushing on towards the other side of the map. That's why they've held on to the contested at point number 3 for so long, and it looks like the Blessed Field Trebuchets have begun their pounding anew into the Chosen, or whatever remains of them, and into the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Is that another Comet of Cassandora? It looks like it might be, and this time there won't be escape for the infantry of Nurgle. King Louen diving in from behind now, and remember, these guys do not have immunopsychology. Terror routes are a problem when faced with the Hippogriff. So Nurgle, realizing that objective number 2 has almost been retaken, they're going to push back that way and wait to mass their troops again, but they need to do it quickly because they are running out of time and they need a double cap. They need to secure one pretty soon here, or it looks like Bretonnia might be able to run away with it. But if they get a double cap soon, they should be fine, and this could get real spicy. Louen and the Elite Cav have done a great job so far. Look at how much infantry they've killed over on objective number 1. Just a pile of corpses there, and it looks like Nurgle is maybe sacking that and now pushing towards the contested, realizing that the Cav isn't positioned to stop their march. But they'll need a little bit more mass, a little bit more punching power over on point number 3 if they want to take it, because obviously the remaining Knights of Bretonnia will be able to swing that way, and that is one of the advantages Bretonnia has. Even though I would not call them a particularly good domination faction, they can, especially on maps like this one that are really wide, really flat, and there's a lot of space in between objectives, a massed cavalry build can be really impactful here. And of course, with units that are ridiculous like those Companions of Canal, we just saw them get resummoned. The fact that you can bring them onto the field multiple times during the course of a battle, it's a big deal for sure. It's frustrating enough to try to kill them one time. When you see them again only a couple minutes later, it can be a little bit disheartening. Now, there will be a little bit of friendly fire from the Chain Lightning. Don't think it will kill any models here, but the Questing Knights are ready to shred their way through Forsaken, and Nurgle does have full control of Bretonnia's natural, but they have not secured that single cap, and now they might need a little bit of time with a triple if they want to crawl their way back into this game. Barons of the Bog with a meaty, a juicy, an impactful, and delectable charge directly into the peasant bowmen, and they will feast upon their flesh and their bones. Crunch, munch. Good night, sweet peasants. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Brutal. They're eating her, and then they're going to eat me. Oh my god. Dude, these Pox Riders are actually an amazing unit. Now, obviously, I'd expect them to crush their way through peasant bowmen no matter what. Most cavalry units can do what they're doing right here, but the fact that they're so tanky, they've been alive for the entire game, they debuff enemy weapon strength so effectively, and they can fight so many different targets because of those debuffs, makes them a really fun unit. They were a great addition to the game, one of my favorite regiments of renown, and really one that I think Nurgle needed quite a bit. Chosen of Nurgle are still around too, because they've been continuously healed up by Festus the Leechlord. Knights of the Lionhearted have been resummoned as well. They will not be able to recap their own natural because the Great Unclean One is going to tear around all this infantry, prevent them from getting onto the points. But it looks like even though Nurgle is securing that double cap now, it's going to be too little, too late. They have 1,600 supply. That will probably end up being a Chosen summoned onto the field, but not going to be able to get on target or get to any of the objectives in time. Stream of Corruption nicely placed from Festus to hit the cavalry, and a big fight brewing actually is going in favor of Bretonnia now, with the rest of the Grail Knights and companions making their way back. Festus is in mortal danger here, but he's full HP and he can mortar strain everything, so not too bad there if the Exalted Heroes can get on top of Louen. Great Unclean One continues to drop some poopage. He's just a troll at this point. Like, he's actively going out of his way to be as disgusting as possible. What is wrong with you, my friend? Learn some manners. And really, it reminds me a lot of Conqueror's Bad Fur Day. I don't know if you guys ever played that for N64, but there was, I mean, that was an amazing title, but in particular, there was a mini game where you could play as cavemen that tried to steal dinosaur eggs, and you would dive into their bases, basically capture the flag, and if you brought them back and won, you get to eat the dinosaur eggs, and then the end of that cutscene was basically you just pooping everywhere. That game was obscene. It was rated mature for a reason, but super fun. Some amazing mini games in there, like immigrant squirrels running away from Wehrmacht teddy bears that were up in pillboxes mowing you down with gigantic machine guns. Wild stuff. But this is going to be the end of the battle here, 1464 to 1100 or so. Great Unclean One will likely not fall before this battle is over. But I think we saw the limitations of Nurgle if they decide to go real top heavy and create that extremely expensive HQ. It does give them complete control over a single objective, and on the maps where it's kind of a lane and you have to push through to get at your opponent's natural, and there's not that much opportunity to flank. Think a map like Black Ark, for instance. I think a build like this one, minus the Great Unclean One, because it's honestly just a shit unit. It's legitimately not good for domination at all. You can make it work in land battle sometimes for dueling, but god, it's horrible for domination. Wanted to try it out anyway, just because it's so cool. We don't get to see it enough, but yeah, it's really bad. But on those kind of maps like Black Ark, I think this kind of build can work pretty well. Basically, you don't contest the middle point at all, the one down below, and you just push through to their natural after you secure your own, and then you keep summoning troops onto your own natural, continue advancing forward inexorably, and you can keep people trapped in your spawn that way and definitely win some powerful victories. But Bretonnia is honestly well suited for countering that kind of strategy because of their cav, right? Their Companions of Cannel, if they find isolated Chosen, will be able to cut them down to size, especially backed up by someone like Louen, and they can play two objectives really well. They mask their cav, and then if an opportunity arises, they can quickly swarm a point with a bunch of cheap fodder and recap. So I think Bretonnia played that perfectly. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. Just play the double cap. You don't need 3. Just play wherever Festus and his Great Unclean One are not, and you can definitely secure yourself a victory. Now, again, this was not a hyper-competitive build from my standpoint. I think Zach B. Sane played that entirely correctly. From my standpoint as Nurgle, if I'm truly going to try to defeat Bretonnia, I'm not going to bring a Great Unclean One because it doesn't give you any map control. No one's going to give it the duels it wants. It's basically just going to waddle around and be useless for the majority of battle, and that's a lot of money to invest on a unit that could be better served going wider. But fun game nonetheless. Really enjoyed it. Hope you did as well, and I'll see you all in the next one. GG to Zach B. Sane.